Okay, you're very good at that, Phoebe. Now, solve by completing the square. What were the magic 3 words that you had to remember yesterday about completing the square? Half and square. So this is a weird one. Usually we want to get everything on the side of the x squared. This is the first time we don't. Since the x squared minus 10x is by itself, I'm going to half it and square. But to do that, something's missing over here. What do I need over here?
The number.
Yeah, what number would that be? 25, right? Because the minus 5 is the half of minus 10, but then you got to square it to figure out what number you're missing. And if I add 25 to the left, add 25 to the right. So now I get x minus 5 squared equals 29. The number that's added to both sides is 25. Because x squared minus 10x plus 25 would factor to x minus 5 times x minus 5. And isn't another name, here it is, x minus 5 times x minus 5. Isn't another name for that just x minus 5 squared? Okay, so that's why it works and how it all gets together. Now, I'm going to square root both sides. That's why we call it completing the square. That's what we did there. Now, square rooting both sides, I get x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 29. And then I add 5 to both sides. And I get x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 29. Yes?
Why do you have to put the plus and the minus?
Oh, because there's a convention in mathematics. If I say to you, what's the square root of 100, what is it?
10 or negative.
Well, technically, we call it 10. But you're right. I'm sorry. We call it 10 as a shortcut, but you're technically right. It is positive or negative 10. Because 10 times 10 is 100, agree? But isn't also negative 10 times negative 10 100? So to take into account that possibility, I put the positive and I put the negative. Bless you. That way both are covered. Okay? And this also makes sense, by the way, because, Chalice, how many answers to a quadratic equation? 2. One of the answers, God bless, is 5 plus radical 29. What's the other answer? 5 minus radical 29. So this is a way of expressing both answers. Okay? Very good question. Now, let's go to solving the same using the quadratic formula. Now, the first thing that we're going to have to do is write out the quadratic formula. And I'm going to go to this page here and write out for you the quadratic formula. Don't be scared. The first time I wrote this formula out on the board in my teaching life, kid Tom Bianchi was sitting in the back. Well, it was in the high school classroom, so there was no sinks there. But when I wrote it out on the board, he went, "Ah!" Held up the sign of a cross, like it was a vampire coming after him. There's a pretty good chance this will be the most complicated looking formula that you have ever seen in your life.
But it's easy, right?
It's extremely easy.
Oh, okay, sure.
Now, and he actually fell out of his chair when he did it. Okay. Now, that looks pretty ugly. But it's, well, that's kind of like an oxymoron. That looks pretty ugly. All right? Now, it is very doable. Extremely doable, as a matter of fact. The whole key is to understand what the heck are A, B, and C. If you know what A, B, and C are, it's a piece of cake. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. What's that? Not exactly. Now, let's start with the question we just did. We just did what? X squared plus 4x or minus 4x? Oh no, it was minus 10x equals 4. Now, the first thing you have to know about the quadratic formula is that before you can begin doing the quadratic formula, you have to get it all onto one side like we normally do. So this is not like completing the square, though the answer will look like you completed the square. So that's my first step. Get it all on one side. What's my first step?
Get it all on one side.
Now, the next step is to identify A, B, and C. You know how like we have y equals mx plus b for the general equation of a line?
Yeah.
The general equation for a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's just like y equals mx plus b. It's the general equation. It's just the way we present a generic quadratic equation. So a is always the number in front of x squared. B is always the number in front of x, and c is always the constant at the end. So in this problem, what do you think a is? 1. What do you think b is? -10. What do you think c is? -4. Now you're going to plug those three values into the formula. Ready? X equals, now what is b over here? So what is the, watch me now, what's the negative of -10? Positive 10. Plus or minus, that doesn't change. Square root of, that doesn't change. B squared. Now you can literally put this whole thing in your calculator, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. -10 squared minus 4 times what? What's A? 1. And what's C? What is C, everybody? -4. All over 2 times 1. Now, can you all get your calculator out? You can just now remember earlier in the year we emphasized how important it was if you're ever going to put a negative into an operation in the calculator, you always have to make sure you put it in parentheses. Everybody remember that? Now is when it's really going to show. Put the -10 in parentheses, then hit squared. Then type in exactly what it says. -4 times 1 times -4. I would put the -4 at the end in parentheses, though I'm not sure it's going to matter. And if you do that, you will get x equals 10 plus or minus the square root of 116 over 2.
It just said 160.
116, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you only did what's under the radical. You have to remember to put the radical there.
Oh, okay.
All right. The problem is if you put the radical in, it'll change it to a decimal. And at this point in time, I want to stop here. And I can tell you that this is very reducible. Let me think here. What's the biggest perfect square that goes into 116? 4 goes into it 29 times. So this would reduce to 5 plus or minus radical 29, which was the same exact answer we got the other way. The only thing is, I am not yet going to teach you how to simplify square root of 116 for another day or two. All right? So if you get to the point where you have everything in the green box, you're good to go. Okay? Yes?
How can positive 10 not negative?
Because b is -10, agree? The formula says you have to negate whatever b is. So if b is -10, what do you get when you negate -10? Positive 10. Okay? Yes?
Are we going to memorize this formula?
Yes and no. I want you to memorize it, but they will give it to you on the regions.
Okay.
So, and it's really, truly not hard. You know, I remember being a freshman in college, sitting in on my very, very first day of a calculus class. And it was Calc 3. I'm sitting in my class in college, and the professor says, now there's about 100 kids in the class, and the professor says, who remembers the quadratic formula? And this very just dry memory comes out, and I just remember going, x equals -b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I hadn't thought about it since May of the previous year, and this was after Labor Day. So it just sticks in your head. You're going to use it enough that, kind of like slope is changing y with changing x, you will be almost that comfortable with it. Okay? All right, so if we take a look at today's lesson sheet, this one says to solve each of these equations using the quadratic formula. Now, I only want you to do the first one here. This would be factorable. You could solve this with factoring. I'm going to show you that with the quadratic formula you get the same exact answer. Go ahead. I'm going to give you maybe a minute and a half 2 minutes at most to do that on your own, and then I'll put it up on the board for you. The people who were buying clothing for the team are very smart. Feel free, if you're a little lost, to talk to each other.
Forgot what to find.
I don't have my glasses. It's the x squared plus 36. X squared plus 3x. All right, so here's our quadratic formula, here's our equation. What does A equal? Notice it equals 0, which is what we want. A equals 1, B equals 3, C equals -10. Now, this is factorable. I would like to go to the side over here, and I want to solve it by factoring. Because, look, factoring is always preferential if you can do it. This would factor to x plus 5 times x minus 2 equals 0. Maybe it's the guy on the left. Maybe it's the guy on the right. Minus 5 minus 5. X equals -5 plus 2 plus 2. X equals 2. So, whatever this formula does, it should yield the answers of -5 and 2. Do we agree? Okay. So now let's start cranking out this formula and see what we get. X equals, now, there's my line. What does B equal here? 3. So I have to put -3. Plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times what? 1 times -10. All over 2 times 1. So x equals, now this is why kids like it. If you can put all of your numbers in here, it's just a matter of grinding out the answers. There's no thinking involved. It's just calculating. And your calculator will do most of that. -3 plus or minus. Now if you do this, you come out with the square root of 49. How many people got the square root of 49? Good, that's because 3 squared is 9, minus 4 times 1 times minus 10 is 40, 9 and 40 make 49. Over 2 times 1 is 2. Well, where's that going to? That means x equals -3 plus or minus. Now there's a better name for the square root of 49. It's 7, very good. All over 2. Now, look, one of these answers is -3, I hope you're watching me now. -3 plus 7. What is -3 plus 7? Come on, -3 plus 7. 4 over 2, comma, what's -3 minus 7? -10 over 2. And what is 4 over 2? 2. And what's -10 over 2?
Do we have to do that?
Oh, listen.
One side.
Very important question. Do we have to do that? Do you remember how I said factoring is always the best way? You should always try to factor it first. But if you can't factor it, this will always give you an answer. It'll be ugly like before with the square root of 116. but it will give you an answer. So you do need to know how to do it, but it's never your primary tool.
But we don't have to do the last steps, like to get.
If they ever say to you, solve using the quadratic formula, you have to use the quadratic formula, and if it works out this way, you have to carry it through to the end. But they don't ever ask that. They only say solve using the quadratic formula when they give you one that you can't factor. And that's really the key to it. If you can't factor it, quadratic formula. Or possibly completing the square. All right, now let's take a look at the next one. And I think in today's lesson, what we're going to do more than anything else is ones that are pretty easy to factor and to work our way through. Let's very quickly try this third one here. X squared plus x minus 3 equals 0. That's not a factorable situation. Okay, go ahead.
Which one Wait, which one?
The third one in.
Yes.
And I'm all done. So when you're done, see if you get the same answer.
Get b equals 1.
What number is in front of the x? 1, right? Okay? All right, folks, we got another 2 days of this, so you don't have to have it mastered today, but you should be able to look at it and say, I can tentatively work my way through this.